They called her the Ghost of Ironwood Forest. For 10 years she ran with wolves, hunted with wolves, and was a wolf, her humanity buried under feral instinct. She knew nothing but the pack and the absolute protection of the giant, silent black wolf they called Fang. But when armed men captured them both, the girl was thrown in a cage, and the wolf was revealed to be a lie. Her protector wasn't just a wolf, he was Kaelin, the long-lost Alpha King. And the feral girl he'd protected? She was the one thing his enemies would kill to possess. The scent of pine and damp earth was Ilara's world. The sharp, metallic tang of a snowshoe hare 50 yards upwind was her dinner. The musky, comforting odor of the pack, her family, was her home. For 10 years, since the world of before had vanished in a blur of screaming metal, fire, and the smell of her own blood. This was all she knew. She was 18 years old, but her mind was not human. It was wolf. She thought in scents, sounds, and survival. The grunts and whimpers of the pack were her language. Her own vocal cords, unused for human speech for a decade, had settled into a matching rhythm of growls, yips, and the occasional mournful howl that she lifted to the full moon. She was faster than her four-legged brothers and sisters. Stronger, too, when her inner pelt, the shift, threatened to surface. But she never let it. The pack was wary of the two legs. They smelled wrong. They carried fire sticks. Even she, who looked like them, was only accepted because she had been brought to the den as a pup, bleeding and half dead, by Fang. Fang was different. He was the true alpha of this wild pack, a massive black wolf whose size dwarfed even the largest timber wolves. He was silent, dominant, and held an intelligence in his golden eyes that felt ancient. He was her protector. When the harsh winters threatened to steal the life from her fragile two-leg body, he was the one who curled around her. When rival males challenged her place, it was Fang's bared teeth that sent them slinking away. On this day, the air was wrong. It started with a snap of a twig that didn't belong to a deer. Ilara, crouched low over a kill, froze. Her head snapped up, nostrils flaring. Man, salt, metal, oil. She let out a low, warning growl. The pack tensed. Fang, who had been watching from a rocky outcrop, was on his feet in an instant, a rumble starting deep in his chest. They burst from the trees, 5 of them. They wore the colors of the forest, green and brown, but they smelled of the wrongness, of walls and floors and soap. They held the black fire sticks. "Hold!" one shouted. His voice was a harsh bark. "There! The ghost!" Ilara didn't understand the sounds, but she understood the intent. Predator. She snarled, baring her teeth, her nails already sharpening into claws. The pack exploded into action, a grey and brown wave of fury. But these men were prepared. Thwip, thwip. 2 wolves yelped as small darts sprouted from their flanks. They staggered, whimpered, and fell, their limbs twitching. Ilara panicked. She scrambled backward, but one of the men was fast. He raised his stick. Thwip! A sharp, stinging pain bit into her shoulder. She ripped the dart out, screaming, a raw, animal sound. The world began to tilt. The scent of pine turned sour. Through the dizzying haze, she saw Fang. He wasn't running. He was attacking. He launched himself at the leader, a blur of black fur and white teeth. The man yelled in pain as Fang's jaws closed on his arm. "The Alpha! Shoot the Alpha!" Thwip, thwip, thwip. 3 darts hit the giant wolf. He roared, a sound of defiance, shaking his massive head. But the drug was potent. He staggered, his powerful legs trembling. He tried to reach Ilara, his golden eyes wide with a desperate human intelligence. He collapsed onto the forest floor, his chest heaving. Ilara crawled toward him. "Fang!" she whimpered. The one sound that was almost a word. She reached him, her own vision blackening at the edges. She buried her face in his thick fur, her body going limp. The last thing she heard before the darkness took her was the leader's voice, strained with pain. "Gideon, check the wolf. Its size, it's not normal. Bag them both. The king must see this." Waking up was a violation. The first sense to return was smell, and it was wrong. Not pine and earth, but sterile cold, ammonia, and the faint, coppery scent of old blood. The second was touch, not soft dirt, but hard, cold metal under her naked back. Ilara's eyes snapped open. She was in a cage, a small metal box in a room of grey stone walls, a single bright, false sun. A light bulb hummed overhead, stinging her sensitive eyes. She shot to her feet, ramming her body against the bars. The clang of metal on metal was deafening. She shrieked, a high-pitched, terrified sound, and retreated to the farthest corner, pulling her knees to her chest. She was trapped. The before-time nightmare. Fire. Metal. Trapped. Easy. Easy, girl. You're safe. A new scent. A woman. Soft, smelling of paper and something sweet, like apple blossom. Ilara snarled, pressing herself harder against the wall. A woman stood outside the bars. She had soft brown hair and wore the clear eyes, glasses, that made her look like an owl. She held no fire stick. Her hands were open. "My name is Dr. Evelyn Reed," the woman said, her voice a low, soothing murmur. "We're not going to hurt you. You're at the Citadel. You're safe." Ilara just stared, trembling, her mind unable to process the mouth sounds. They were noise. A threat. "She's completely feral, Gideon," Dr. Reed said, not taking her eyes off Ilara. A man stepped into view. He was the leader from the forest. His arm was in a sling. He smelled of power, of alpha. But he was not her alpha. He was wrong alpha. "I see that, Doctor," the man, Gideon, said. His voice was gravel. 10 years. The reports were true. But what is she? Human? Or one of us? "She's one of us," Dr. Reed said softly. "I can smell it. The ozone. She's a shifter, an omega by the scent of her. Unturned, unclaimed. It's a miracle she survived." Ilara's head was spinning. The room was too small. The air was too still. She felt a panic rising, a desperate need to claw, to bite, to run. She needed the sky. She needed the trees. She needed Fang. She let out a desperate, whimpering howl. "Fang! Where is he?" "What's she doing?" Gideon asked. "She's calling," Dr. Reed said, her face pale. "She's calling for her pack, or for him. The Black Wolf." "He's in the next cell," Gideon said, nodding to a solid steel door. "We built that transport cage special, heaviest tranquilizers we have. He's been fighting them for 12 hours. Whatever he is, he's not just a wolf." As if summoned, a deafening crash echoed from the next room, shaking the stone floor. It was followed by a deep, guttural roar of pure fury. Ilara shot to her feet. "Fang!" She howled again, a call of recognition and terror. He was here. He was trapped, too. "He's only calm when she's quiet," Gideon noted, rubbing his temples. "And she's only quiet when she can hear or smell him. It's a bond, but it makes no sense. He's a wolf. She's a werewolf." "Nature is full of," Dr. Reed began, but was cut off. The entire building shook. An alarm blared, a hideous, screaming, metal bird sound that made Ilara clap her hands over her ears. "Intruder alert!" a voice shouted from outside. "Gate breach! We're under attack!" Gideon swore, drawing a weapon from his hip. "Dr. Reed, get back! Now!" The stone wall of the cell block exploded inward. Dust, shrapnel, and the smell of blood filled the room. Ilara screamed, cowering. Through the smoke, 3 figures stepped in. They were tall, dressed in black armor. They moved with a predator's grace. They, too, smelled of Alpha. "Find the Omega," one of them growled. "Alpha Marcus wants her. Kill the witnesses." One of the black-armored men raised a weapon at Dr. Reed. "No!" Gideon yelled, opening fire. But before anyone could move, a sound ripped through the chaos that dwarfed all others. It was the sound of reinforced steel tearing like paper. Screech! Boom! The steel door to Fang's cell blasted off its hinges and flew across the room, embedding itself in the far wall. In the doorway, wreathed in smoke and red emergency lights, stood a man. He was naked. He was covered in sweat and streaks of his own blood from where he'd fought the steel. He was impossibly tall, with shoulders as wide as the doorway. His black hair was wild, his features sharp and brutal, and his eyes were the burning, intelligent, golden eyes of Fang. Elara stopped breathing. The black-armored men froze. They stared. "No!" one of them whispered, his voice shaking. "It can't be! He's dead!" The man took a step. The power rolling off him was suffocating. It was not Alpha. It was the Alpha. He looked at the men, then at Gideon, then at Dr. Reed. Finally, his gaze locked on Elara, huddled in her cage. A name, unspoken for a decade, rose from the deepest, most terrified part of the attackers' minds. "Kaelin," Gideon breathed, dropping his weapon and falling to one knee. "My king!" The Alpha King ignored him. He looked at the man nearest to Dr. Reed. Kaelin's lips peeled back from his teeth in a snarl that was pure Fang. In a blur of motion too fast to track, he crossed the room, seized the attacker's head, and smashed it into the stone wall. The king had returned, and Elara, seeing her wolf protector wearing the skin of a man, finally understood. Fang was not a wolf. He was one of them. He was a monster, and he had lied to her. The two remaining attackers didn't hesitate. They were trained, elite. They were also terrified. They simultaneously opened fire. The sound of automatic weapons in the confined space was a physical blow, deafening and brutal. Elara shrieked and curled into a ball, a primal terror gripping her. Kaelin didn't flinch. He moved like a shadow, a force of nature. The bullets, even the silver-laced ones, seemed to tear through his skin, only to be pushed out an instant later by a healing factor, so potent it was visible. He didn't just fight them. He dismantled them. He broke the first one's arm with a sound like a tree branch snapping, then used the man as a shield against the other's fire. He threw the body aside and closed the distance. The fight was over in less than 10 seconds. It wasn't a fight. It was an execution. Silence descended, heavy and thick, broken only by Elara's panicked breathing and the drip of blood from the king's knuckles. Kaelin stood in the center of the room, his chest heaving. He was magnificent and terrifying. He was the apex predator she had known all her life, but now he was in the wrong skin. My king," Gideon stammered, still on his knee, his head bowed. We thought you were dead." 10 years. Kaelin turned his golden eyes, still blazing with the fury of the shift, onto his beta. His voice, when it came, was a low rumble, rusty from a decade of disuse. "Gideon." It was one word, but it carried the weight of 1,000 commands, a decade of pain, and the absolute authority of a king. I have been searching," Gideon said, his voice thick with emotion. "Every day. I never gave up." Kaelin's gaze softened, just a fraction. He nodded once. Then his attention snapped back to the more immediate problem. He looked at Dr. Reed, who was pressed against the wall, white as a sheet, but unharmed. He gave another curt nod, a gesture of thanks for her presence, perhaps. Then he turned to the cage, He turned to Ilara. She whimpered, pressing herself so hard against the bars she risked breaking her own bones. This man was her protector. The warm fur, the safe rumble, the lick on the cheek. It was him? She felt a profound sense memory. The before time, the fire, the men who smelled like him, like Shifter, pulling her mother from their home. The smell of gasoline, the screaming. He was one of them, the skinwalkers, the monsters. Ilara, Kaelin said. His voice was softer now, but it still vibrated with power. She shrieked at the sound, a raw denial. Kaelin's face, carved from granite, cracked with a deep, profound pain. This was not the reunion he had imagined. For 10 years, he had been her silent guardian. Now, she looked at him with the same terror she had shown the men who had just tried to kill them. He ignored Gideon, who was scrambling to his feet. "Get me clothes, and secure the citadel. They will send more. Send word to the council. The king is back." "Yes, my king," Gideon said, practically running from the room. Kaelin turned back to the cage. He slowly, deliberately, knelt, bringing himself lower. He was trying to make himself smaller, a gesture he had used 1,000 times as Fang. "It's me," he growled, the sound caught between man and wolf. "Ilara, it's Fang." To prove it, he did the one thing he knew might reach her. He closed his eyes, and with a sickening sound of cracking bones and shifting muscle, his hand contorted. Fur sprouted, his fingers elongated. In seconds, his human hand was a giant black wolf's paw. He pressed it gently against the bars. Ilara stared. The paw, his paw, the paw that had nudged her to safety, that had pinned her in play, that had rested on her back as she slept. Hesitantly, trembling, she reached out. She touched the fur. It was real. Then, with another groan, he shifted it back into a human hand. Ilara recoiled as if burned. She scrambled back, shaking her head violently. No, it was wrong. It was a trick. Kaelin let out a long, ragged breath. He had protected her from the forest, from starvation, from rival wolves. But he had not protected her from the trauma that had put her there. The trauma he had failed to stop a decade ago. He stood up, his royal authority returning like a shroud. He looked at the lock on her cage. "She needs a room, not a cell," he commanded to the empty air, knowing he'd be heard. He grabbed the steel bar of the lock and, with a single, effortless grunt, tore the entire mechanism from the door. He pulled the door open. Ilara screamed and threw herself at the back wall, snarling, her own eyes flashing a faint, terrified blue, the color of an omega. Kaelin stopped her. He wouldn't force her. He had broken her trust by becoming a man. "Dr. Reed," he said, his back to the doctor. "Yes, Alpha. King," she stammered. "You will help her. You will teach her. You will fix what was broken." His voice was heavy. "Gideon will give you anything you need. You will answer only to me." And you?" Dr. Reed asked, finding a sliver of courage. Kaelin looked back at the girl, his feral ward, his greatest failure and his only secret. "I," he said, his voice raw with a grief 10 years old, "have a kingdom to reclaim, and a rival to burn to the ground." The days that followed were a new kind of prison for Ilara. She was moved from the cell to a room. It was larger, with one wall made of shatterproof glass that overlooked a contained forest. A garden, they called it. It had a soft, square den, a bed, and a water hole in the wall, a bathroom. But it was still a cage. Dr. Evelyn Reed became her new, permanent shadow. She was patient. She never raised her voice. She never smelled of anger. She would sit just outside the room at first and make mouth sounds. "My name is Evelyn," she would say, pointing to herself. "Evelyn." Then she would hold up a picture, a red, round thing. "Apple." Elara would just watch, her eyes cold. She didn't want apple. She wanted the sharp, hot taste of hair. She didn't want Evelyn. She wanted Fang. But Fang was gone. In his place was Kalen. He would come every night. He would stand outside the glass wall, dressed in the dark, severe clothes of the wrong skin. He was clean. He smelled of soap and leather and power. He no longer smelled of pine and damp earth. He no longer smelled like home. He would just stand there, watching her. He tried to speak to her, his low voice vibrating through the glass. But she would turn her back, curling up on the bed and facing the wall. He was the king. The word was spoken in hushed, awed tones by everyone. Gideon, the guards, the old woman who brought her food. Following Kalen's return, the citadel was in a controlled frenzy. Gideon, reinstated as the king's beta, was purging the ranks. The attackers who breached the wall had inside help. There was a rot in the kingdom, one that had festered in the king's absence. Kalen was ruthless. He was a king, but he was also a wolf who had lived on the edge of survival for a decade. He held court in the war room, not the throne room. The men who attacked, Gideon reported, his face grim. Their armor bore no insignia, but the silver, the scent, it was Shadow Ridge Pack. Kalen's hands clenched on the armrests of his chair. The name was like acid. Marcus Thorne. "He's not just an alpha anymore, Kalen," Gideon warned. "In your absence, he's consolidated power. He calls himself the Regent Alpha. He controls the southern territories and the silver mines. He is, for all intents and purposes, a rival king." "He is a murderer," Kalen growled. He was thrown back, 10 years into the fire. The memory was as fresh as the night it happened. He had been Kalen, the young, new Alpha King, barely 25. His fated mate, Isabella, was at his side. They were visiting the northern border, a diplomatic mission. Marcus Thorne, then a powerful but subordinate Alpha, had ambushed them. It wasn't a battle, it was a massacre. Marcus wanted the throne. He wanted Kalen's territory. He set fire to the lodge. Kalen had fought, but he was outnumbered. He saw Isabella, trapped by a burning beam, her hand outstretched. He had tried to reach her, but Marcus's men dragged him down, stabbing him with silver, leaving him for dead in the burning wreckage. He had healed, but his soul had not. Isabella was gone. His mate bond was a screaming, hollow void in his chest. His pack, dead. Broken, he had not returned to the citadel. He let them think he was dead. What was a king without his queen? What was an alpha without his mate? He ran. He shifted into his wolf form and let the grief consume him. He ran until his human mind was a whisper, until only the wolf remained. He became Fang. He ran for weeks until he stumbled into the Ironwood National Forest, on the very edge of his own territory. And there, in a snowdrift, near a wagon that had been overturned and burned, he found a child, an 8-year-old girl. She was bleeding from a head wound, half frozen, but alive. He had smelled the shifter in her. She was a survivor of another of Marcus's clean-ups. He couldn't be a king, he couldn't save his mate, but he could save this pup. He had nudged her, guided her to the wild pack he'd been observing. He'd used his superior strength and intelligence to become their alpha. And for 10 years, he had performed his penance. He had been Fang. He had protected Elara. Now, Marcus was back, and he knew Elara was alive. He didn't just come for her because she's a feral, Kalen said, his voice dangerously low. He knows what she is. My king? Gideon asked. She is the last of the Lunai bloodline. Kaelin said, speaking the ancient forbidden name. A lunar omega. I recognized the scent, even when she was a child. It's why he hunted her family. It's why he burned that wagon. Gideon's blood ran cold. A lunar omega. We thought they were myths. An omega who can heal. Heal anything, Kaelin whispered. Even the mate scar. A widowed alpha, like Marcus, or like me, could be made whole. She is a weapon, a prize beyond measure. And I just let her live wild, like an animal. His self-loathing was a tangible thing. He stood, slamming his fist on the table. He will not have her. I lost my queen. I will not lose my ward. He went to her room. He stood at the glass. She was asleep, but not peacefully. She was whimpering, her limbs twitching. A nightmare. He entered the room, a silent shadow. Dr. Reed was asleep in a chair outside. Ilara was thrashing. "Fire! Hot! Mama!" The word was a choked sob, the first human word he'd heard from her. Kaelin's heart broke. He sat on the edge of her bed. He didn't touch her. He just let his scent fill the room. Not the king's scent, but Fang's. He let the pine, the earth, the musk of the wolf seep into his skin. Ilara's thrashing slowed. She turned, still asleep, and her hand fell onto his knee. She didn't pull away. Her breathing evened out. She was safe. Kaelin sat there until dawn, a stone statue. He was her protector, but he was also her monster. And the man who had ruined both their lives was coming. Alpha Marcus Thorne surveyed his court at Shadow Keep. It was a fortress of black stone and cold iron. His power was absolute. His pack was a disciplined army. Yet, for all his strength, he was incomplete. The mate bond, severed by his own hand when his fated mate had refused his dark ambitions, was a constant, dull ache. It made him irritable, prone to rages. He needed the lunar omega. He had thought her dead, lost in the fire with the rest of her useless family. Then, the report. "She's alive," his Reaper Scout hissed, kneeling on the floor. "The Ironwood ghost. It's her. She's at the Citadel." Marcus went still. The Citadel. Why would Gideon, that loyal dog, care about a feral girl? "Because he is with her, Alpha," the scout said, his voice trembling. "Kaelin, he's alive." The room temperature dropped. Marcus felt a jolt of pure, cold fury, followed by a sliver of fear. Kaelin, alive. The man who wouldn't die. He was the Black Wolf, the scout hurried to explain. He was with her, hiding, living as a beast. Marcus began to laugh, a cold, harsh sound. The great king, reduced to a common animal, hiding in the dirt with my little Omega prize. He smiled. "This is perfect. He has kept her safe for me. And now I will take her, and I will finish the job I started 10 years ago." He turned to his warriors. "Prepare the strike team, all of them. We are going to the Citadel. I will rip his kingdom from his hands, and I will claim my Omega." Back at the Citadel, the tension was a coiled spring. Kaelin had doubled the patrols. He and Gideon worked day and night, shoring up defenses, rooting out traitors. Dr. Reed, meanwhile, was making progress. "Ilara," she said, holding a small silver object. "Spoon. Spoon." Ilara looked at her. She had stopped snarling at the doctor. She was watching, learning. Her human mind, locked away for a decade, was a dry sponge, soaking up everything. She pointed a finger at the object. "Un." Her voice was rough, a croak, but it was a word. Evelyn Reed beamed, tears in her eyes. "Yes, Ilara, yes, that's right." Ilara pointed to Evelyn. "Lynn." "Yes," she pointed to herself. "I-la-ra. Yes, Ilara." Ilara's eyes then darted to the glass wall. Kaelin was there, as always. He had just arrived. He looked exhausted, but his eyes were bright, fixed on her. Elara stared at him. Her expression was complex. Not terror, not any more, but deep, profound confusion. She lifted a trembling finger and pointed at the most powerful man on the continent. Fang. Kalen's breath hitched. He closed his eyes, a single tear tracing a path down his stone-carved cheek. He nodded. Yes, he whispered, pressing his own hand to the glass. I am Fang. It was a breakthrough, a bridge, fragile and thin, but a bridge nonetheless. The moment was shattered by the sound of an explosion that rocked the citadel to its foundations. Alarms blared. "Gideon!" Kalen roared, already in motion. Gideon's voice came over the intercom. "Main gate! It's Marcus! He's here!" Kalen looked at Elara. Her face was pale with a terror he knew all too well. The before time was here. The fire had returned. "Evelyn," Kalen commanded, "bar the door. Do not, under any circumstances, let her out, or let anyone in." He ran, his body already humming with the urge to shift. This time he wouldn't run from the fire. He would be the fire. The battle for the citadel had begun. The fight was brutal. Marcus's Reapers were elite, and they had come for a singular purpose. They bypassed the main guard, using explosives to blast a secondary entrance into the citadel's living quarters. Their target was Elara. Kalen, moving with a speed that defied his human form, met them in the halls. He and Gideon fought back to back, a whirlwind of controlled fury. They were the king and his beta, a seamless unit of fang and claw, even in their human skins. But Marcus had an army. In the room, Elara was frantic. She could smell it. Blood, fire, and the coppery ozone scent of wrong alphas. She slammed her hands against the glass, howling, a feral sound of rage and terror. "Elara, it's okay. We're safe." Dr. Reed tried to reassure her, but she was shaking herself. Suddenly, Elara went still. A new sensation, sharp and tingling, started deep in her belly. It was a heat, a pressure, a sudden overwhelming need. The air around her changed. Her own scent, normally a faint trace of omega, exploded, becoming thick, sweet, and intoxicating. It was a scent of honey and moonlight and desperate invitation. Dr. Reed's eyes went wide. She stumbled back, her hand flying to her nose. "Oh no, not now." Elara's first moon, her heat, triggered by the stress, the violence, and the proximity of so many alphas, her body had finally declared itself. In the hallway, the alphas fighting stopped. The Reapers, Kalen, Gideon. They all froze. The scent hit them like a physical wave, a lunar omega in her first heat. It was the most powerful aphrodisiac in their world, a scent that promised power, completion, and ecstasy. "The Omega!" one of the Reapers roared, his eyes glazing over with raw, primal lust. "She's in heat. Find her!" The battle dissolved into a frenzied rush, not of soldiers but of animals, desperate to get to the source. "Kalen!" Gideon yelled, staggering, his own alpha instincts warring with his loyalty. "The scent! I can't! It's too strong!" Kalen was barely holding on. His fangs were elongated, his eyes pure gold. The mate scar in his chest, the hollow void left by Isabella, was throbbing, aching to be filled. The scent wasn't just lust, it was a promise of healing. He roared, a sound of denial, and threw one of his own men, an alpha who had turned toward Elara's room, back against the wall. "Hold the line!" he commanded, his voice a guttural snarl. He was the king. His will was iron. He would not let this happen. But he knew it was a losing fight. He had to end this. In her room, Elara was on the floor, panting. Her body was on fire. She was terrified. She didn't know what she needed. Fang. She needed Fang, her protector, her alpha. The steel door to her room began to buckle, a heavy thud from outside. "She's in here," a voice shouted. Dr. Reed, showing a bravery she never knew she possessed, stood in front of the door. "You can't!" The door blasted open, sending the doctor flying. Two of Marcus's reapers stood there, their faces inhuman masks of lust. They stalked toward Ilara. Ilara snarled, her back to the wall, her claws extended. Before they could take a step, a black and grey blur slammed into them from the side. It was Gideon. "Get back!" he yelled, fighting his own instincts to protect her. He was loyal, but he was overwhelmed. One of the reapers sliced him across the chest with a silver blade. Gideon roared in pain and fell. The reaper smiled, his eyes locked on Ilara. He reached for her. "No!" A sound like a thunderclap filled the hall. Kalen appeared. He was no longer fighting his instincts. He was embracing them. He was not a king. He was not a man. He was an alpha protecting his mate. He didn't kill the reaper. He unmade him. He stood over the body, his chest heaving, his body covered in blood. He turned, slowly, to Ilara. She was staring at him. The scent in the room was suffocating. He could feel the fated mate bond, long dormant, snapping into place like a white-hot cable. She wasn't just his ward. She wasn't just a lunar omega. She was his second chance, his fated queen. He was overwhelmed by a tidal wave of lust, protection, and a desperate, healing warmth. His mate scar was vanishing. "Kalen," Ilara whimpered. The heat was driving her mad. She didn't see a king. She saw her protector, her alpha, her mate. She crawled toward him, her body aching. "Fang, please. It hurts." He was shaking. He knew what he had to do, what the bond demanded. He had to claim her, bite her, mark her as his. It was the only way to save her from the fever, the only way to protect her from the others. He knelt, his fangs extending. "As you wish, Kalen," a new voice said, slick and cold. Kalen froze. Alpha Marcus Thorne stood in the doorway, a silver pistol in his hand, aimed at Ilara's head. "Claim her," Marcus sneered. "And I will kill her. Or step aside and let me." The world compressed to the space between the three of them. Kalen was frozen, trapped between the primal urge to claim his mate and the cold, silver threat of the gun. The heat in the room was a physical thing, a fog of pheromones that made the air shimmer. "You're a fool, Kalen," Marcus hissed, his own face a mask of sweat, his knuckles white on the grip of the pistol. He too was fighting the scent. "You hid in the woods for 10 years, playing wolf daddy to the one thing that could have saved you." "Marcus," Kalen growled, slowly rising to his full height. "Let her go." "Let her go? I've been hunting her bloodline for 15 years, Marcus laughed. "You thought my attack on you was about a throne. You thought I burned her family's wagon for practice? It was always about her, the last lunar omega." Ilara was panting, her mind a swirl of heat, terror, and dawning comprehension. He was the before time, the fire, the screaming, the wrong alpha from her nightmares. "You," Ilara whispered. The word a rasp. Marcus's eyes snapped to her. "It speaks," he smiled. "Yes, little wolf. Me. The man who killed your mother. The man who would have killed you if you hadn't slipped away." "Why?" Kalen demanded, his body vibrating, ready to spring. "Why?" Marcus yelled, his composure cracking. "Because of this power. The power to heal the mate scar. The power to force a bond. She isn't just a healer, you idiot. A lunar omega can bind any alpha, fated or not. She is the ultimate kingmaker. And she was mine." Kalen's blood ran cold. Force a bond. Marcus didn't want to be healed. He wanted to use her, to bind her, to enslave her power, and unite the packs under his unbreakable, unnatural control. "And you," Marcus sneered at Kaelin. "You were just a bonus. I killed your mate to break you. I took your pack to weaken you. And now, I will take your new mate right before your eyes." He shifted his aim from Ilara to Kaelin's chest. "I'll kill you, claim her, and her power will heal me. I will be king, and she will be my pet." It was the fatal mistake. He took his eyes off Ilara. In that half-second, Ilara's world snapped into focus. The heat, the pain, the confusion, it all burned away, replaced by a single, sharp, feral instinct. The same instinct Fang had taught her. Protect your pack. Kill the threat. She didn't scream. She didn't cry. She howled. It was not the call of an omega in heat. It was not a sound of submission or invitation. It was a cry of pure, undiluted dominance. It was the howl of a wolf who had survived a decade of brutal wilderness. It was the call of a queen. The sound wave hit both alphas like a physical blow. Marcus staggered, his ears ringing, his alpha instincts screaming in confusion. An omega cannot command. Kaelin, however, heard it for what it was. It wasn't a command. It was a rally. He moved. As Marcus turned, firing the pistol wildly, Kaelin was already there. He didn't try to dodge the bullet. He took it high in the shoulder, the silver burning, but he didn't stop. He slammed his arm into Marcus's, shattering the man's wrist. The gun clattered to the floor. Marcus roared in pain, and his inner pelt surfaced. His claws extended, and he raked them across Kaelin's chest. Kaelin fell back, the silver-laced claws doing deep damage. Marcus loomed over him, his face a mask of triumph. "Still. Too weak." He raised his claws for the killing blow. "Fang!" Marcus turned. Ilara was airborne. She had launched herself from the bed, a feral blur of animal grace. She didn't fight like a shifter. She fought like a wolf. She didn't aim for the chest. She aimed for the throat. She hit him full force, her own claws, which she hadn't known how to use, extended and sharp. She raked them across his face, but her real weapons were her teeth. She bit down on his throat, her jaws clamping with a strength born of 10 years of hunting. She tore, shaking her head, a violent, feral motion. Marcus gurgled, clawing at her, but she held on, her eyes blazing with a silver light. Kaelin, watching, saw it. The lunar power. It wasn't just healing, it was power. With a final, sickening rip, Ilara tore Marcus's throat out. He collapsed, his eyes wide in shock, drowning in his own blood. Silence. Ilara stood over the body, trembling, covered in blood, her chest heaving. She looked wild, terrifying, and beautiful. The heat was still raging, but the threat was gone. She turned. Kaelin was on the floor, leaning against the wall. The silver poisoning from the bullet and the claws was spreading. Black veins were tracing their way from his wounds. He was dying. "Kaelin," she whispered. She stumbled to him, falling to her knees. Her mind was a mess of instinct. Packmate, hurt. Protector, hurt. Mate, dying. "It burns," he whispered, his golden eyes dimming. "No," she said. It was a command. She placed her hands on his chest, over the deepest claw marks. She didn't know what she was doing. She just did. She closed her eyes and pushed. A soft silver light bloomed from her palms. It wasn't hot. It was cool, like moonlight. Kaelin gasped as the light entered his wounds. The black veins receded. The burning silver was neutralized, forced out of his skin in smoking pellets. The flesh underneath knitted itself back together. In seconds, the wounds were gone. Kaelin stared at her, breathing heavily. He was healed, whole. Even the old mate scar, the hollow void, was gone. It was filled not by Isabella's memory, but by Ilara's presence. She was still touching his chest, her head bowed, exhausted. He reached up, his hand steady, and touched her face. She flinched, then leaned into his touch. She looked up. Her eyes were no longer silver, just a clear, terrified blue. He saw her. Not the feral girl, not the lunar Omega, Ilara. She saw him, not the monster, not the king. Fang, Kalen. Kalen, she said again, her voice clear. Ilara, he replied. The fated mate bond, healed and pure, ignited. It was not a bond of lust, but of pure, unconditional, absolute belonging. He pulled her to him. The heat, her first moon, was no longer a raging fire. It was a warm, steady glow. He was her anchor. He leaned in, and as Gideon and Dr. Reed stumbled into the doorway, the Alpha King gently, tenderly, claimed his feral queen. He bit the juncture of her neck and shoulder, a possessive, protective mark that declared to the world, mine. She didn't cry out. She sighed, her body finally relaxing, and pressed her face into his chest. Safe. Home. Ilara woke to a strange and unfamiliar sensation. Silence. For as long as she could remember, her life had been a symphony of noise, the rustle of leaves, the snap of twigs, the pounding of her own blood during a hunt, and most recently, the agonizing, screaming fire of her first moon. Now there was only the soft weight of heavy blankets and the slow, steady rhythm of breathing in the room. It was his breathing. She turned her head. In the pre-dawn light, she saw him. Not Kalen, the king, but Fang, the wolf. He was in his full, massive wolf form. A black shadow curled on the floor at the foot of her bed. His golden eyes were open, watching her. He had been her vigil. A new sensation made her wince. She reached up, her fingers tracing the juncture of her neck and shoulder. The skin was tender, but it wasn't a wound. It was a focus. The mark Kalen had given her pulsed with a low, steady warmth, a silent hum that vibrated through her entire being. It was an anchor, calming the last vestiges of the feral panic, smoothing the raw edges of her trauma. It didn't just say mine, it said safe. As she watched, the giant wolf rose. With a soundless ripple of muscle and a faint crackle of power, the form of the wolf dissolved. Bones reshaped, fur receded, and the man, Kalen, stood in his place. He was dressed only in simple black trousers, his scarred chest a testament to battles old and new. He looked at her, his golden eyes raw with an emotion she was just learning to name. Ilara, he said. Her name was a prayer. Kalen, she replied, her own voice no longer a croak. It was clear. He didn't move toward her, giving her space. How do you feel? She considered this. She felt quiet. The before-time nightmares were still there, but they were shadows at the edge of the forest, no longer monsters at her throat. The heat was gone, replaced by the steady warmth of the bond. I am whole, she said, testing the word. It felt right. A soft knock came at the door. Dr. Reed entered, her arm in a sling, her face pale but beaming. You're awake. She curtsied, a gesture that was new and strange. Luna. Luna, Ilara repeated. She looked at Kalen. It is the title of the Alpha's mate, he explained softly. The Queen. Evelyn bustled in, setting down a tray of food, not the processed mush from the cell, but roasted meat, bread, and fruit. Ilara, Luna. The king has a council meeting. The subordinate Alphas, they are here. They are concerned. Kalen's expression darkened. That is an understatement. Concerned? Ilara asked, her predator's instincts sharpening. Of Marcus. Marcus is gone, thanks to you, Kalen said, his voice hard. No, they are concerned. About you. The great hall of the citadel was a cavern of stone and old wood, built to inspire awe. Today it was filled with the acrid scent of fear, defiance, and stale anger. 24 alphas, lords of their own territories, were gathered. Kaelin sat on the high seat, a carved stone throne. But he was not relaxed. He was coiled, a king holding his ground. "A feral, Kaelin?" Lord Alistair, an old, powerful alpha with a mane of grey hair, was shouting. His voice echoed in the chamber. "You have bound the entire kingdom to a wild animal. We heard the reports. She cannot speak. She ripped Marcus Thorne's throat out with her teeth. She is a monster." "She is my queen," Kaelin's voice cut through the hall, cold as iron. "And she is the lunar Omega who saved this citadel and healed her king when your guards failed." "Healed," Alistair spat, "or infected. You were lost to grief for 10 years, a ghost, and you return bound to a rabid wolf. She is a weapon, Kaelin, one you cannot control. What stops her from turning on us when the moon is full? What stops her from ripping our throats out?" "She did in 10 seconds what none of you," Kaelin said, his voice dropping to a dangerous whisper as he stood. "Dared to do in 10 years. She ended a tyrant. You will show her respect." "Respect?" Alistair laughed, a harsh, barking sound. "That thing? She will be your downfall. The people will not follow a savage. Marcus may be dead, but his ideals of purity and strength remain. You show weakness by binding yourself to a broken feral girl." "She is not broken," Kaelin stated, his power rolling off him, pressing the other alphas into their seats. "She is pure. She survived what would have killed any of us. She is stronger than all of... I am... Here." The voice, a clear, low alto, cut through the tension like a silver blade. The hall went silent. Every alpha turned. Ilara stood in the main doorway. Gideon, his chest bandaged, stood beside it. He had seen her approach and had immediately, respectfully, stepped aside and bowed his head. She was barefoot. Her feet, tough and calloused, made no sound on the cold stone floor. Dr. Reed had given her a simple, dark green dress, but on her it looked regal. Her black hair, brushed and clean, cascaded down her back like a wild cape. She wasn't wearing jewels or a crown. She didn't need to. She walked into the hall. Her gaze, clear and intelligent, swept over the room. She was not a frightened girl. She was not a prisoner. She was a predator assessing her new territory. She met the eyes of every glower, every sneer. She was not intimidated. She had faced starving bears and rabid wolves. These men were just loud. She walked directly to the dais and stood beside Kaelin, not behind him. She placed her hand on his arm, over the spot where her mark on him lay hidden. It was a silent, public claiming of him. The bond pulsed between them, visible to all as a faint shimmer of power. Alistair, furious at the interruption and the show of unity, sneered. "So, the pet has learned to walk on 2 legs. Tell us, girl, did the king teach you to fetch? Or do you just kill on command?" Ilara turned her head slowly. She met his gaze. The hall was so quiet, a pin drop would have sounded like a thunderclap. "I can speak," she said, her voice carrying to every corner. "I learned your words in a cage. You use them to wound, to hide. I use them for truth." She took a step toward Alistair, who instinctively stiffened. "I can howl," she continued, her voice gaining strength. "I learned that in the forest. It is the sound of family, of loyalty, of the pack. A sound you have, forgotten." She took another step. He was a prime alpha, and yet he was frozen, trapped by her silver-blue eyes. "And I can bite." Her voice was a low growl now. I learned that from my enemy, the one I killed. She tilted her head. He, and you, smell the same. Insolence! Alistair roared, but there was a tremor of fear in his voice. Fear! Elara identified, her voice slicing through his. She turned, addressing the entire room. You fear what you cannot cage. You fear me, because I am not soft. I am not Alpha. I am not Omega. I am the wild. I am the pack. I am the one who survived when your world burned. She pointed a finger at Alistair. You sit in your stone house and talk of honor while a monster rules. I sat in the dirt and learned justice. I did not kill Marcus Thorne because I was commanded. I killed him because he was wrong. He was a sickness in the pack. I ended him. She turned back to Kaelin, her expression softening. Her voice, though, remained strong, for all to hear. Kaelin is your king. He is my mate. He is my fang. She smiled, a quick, dangerous flash of white teeth. And I am his. This is our territory. Now, you are our pack. Her gaze swept the room one last time, hard and uncompromising. You will be loyal, or you will be the enemy. Choose. The choice was clear. Loyalty or exile. She had not just claimed Kaelin, she had claimed all of them. The sheer, untamed lunar power radiating from her, backed by the unshakable iron of the healed king, was a new, undeniable force. Alistair, a politician to his core, recognized a fundamental shift in power. He saw her not as a broken thing, but as the very definition of strength. She was not a rabid wolf, she was the apex. His rage broke, his fear won. He bowed, his head low, sinking to one knee. Luna, he said, his voice thick with submission. One by one, like a wave, the other alphas knelt. Kaelin stood, pulling Elara to his side, his hand grasping hers. He looked at her, his heart so full he thought it might burst. He was the Alpha King, but he had been lost, broken by grief. She, the feral Omega, had been a girl, broken by trauma. Together, in the heart of the wild, they had saved each other. And now, the feral queen had taken her throne. And so, the feral Omega became a queen, and the broken king found his purpose. Their story was not one of taming, but of healing. Elara taught Kaelin how to live and lead again, and he gave her a world where she could not only belong, but rule. But Marcus Thorne's legacy is long, and many of the old packs still whisper that a wild wolf has no place on the throne. Elara's journey from feral to feral queen has only just begun. Their greatest battle may be over, but their war for acceptance is far from finished. What do you think will happen next? Should Elara try to become more human, or should she teach the kingdom how to be more wild? Let me know your thoughts in the comments below. If you loved this story of wild love, fated mates, and karmic justice, please show your support. It means the world to me. Go ahead and hit that like button, share this video with a friend who loves a good werewolf story, and most importantly, subscribe to the channel and ring that notification bell so you never miss an adventure. Thank you so much for listening. We'll see you in the next story.